So um, here is a really terrifying statistic for you. Almost 60% of new managers actually fail within their first 24 months on the job.
Wow, yeah, 60% is massive.
Right. It's wild. And, what is truly crazy about that number is that they do not fail because they suddenly forgot how to do the work.
Oh, absolutely not. It's usually the exact opposite, actually.
Exactly. They fail because they rely on the exact superpower that got them promoted in the first place, which is, doing everything themselves.
Yeah, the classic individual contributor trap.
Exactly. So welcome to today's deep dive. We are doing something a bit different today. We are stepping into a very specific role.
We are essentially acting as your mentors today.
Right, speaking directly to you, the listener, the stressed, newly minted, first-time manager who is currently staring at an organizational chart, looking at the names reporting to you, and quietly panicking.
Just trying to figure out how to build and lead this team without completely losing your mind.
Because it is a lot. And to guide you through this, our main source today is the Leading with Let Them Companion Guide, which was co-authored by Mel Robbins and David Gerbitz.
Yeah, and for context, David Gerbitz is the former COO of SiriusXM and Pandora. So he brings some serious operational weight to this.
Definitely. And we really need to talk about that transition because it is arguably the most profound, jarring psychological transition you will ever make in your professional life.
It really is. I mean, think about it. When you are an individual contributor, your entire value proposition to the company is just your personal output.
Right. It's just you and your keyboard.
Exactly. If a project is falling behind, you just roll up your sleeves, you put your headphones on, you cancel your weekend plans, and you just brute force your way to the finish line.
You just power through it.
Right. You have absolute control over the quality and the pacing of the deliverable. But the moment you are handed a team, that entire equation breaks.
It totally shatters.
Yeah.
Because your value is no longer what you can produce with your own two hands.
No, your value is what you can inspire and guide others to produce, and that is a huge leap.
It is a massive leap. And that shift from, doing to leading, that is exactly where the chaos happens.
Oh yeah, the immediate biological instinct.
Yes, because when a cross-functional project gets delayed or a quarterly OKR is at risk, your instinct is just to snatch the keyboard away from your team member and say, look, just let me do it.
It feels faster. It feels safer.
But as we are going to explore today, relying exclusively on yourself to control outcomes simply does not scale.
It doesn't scale at all. It just creates these massive organizational bottlenecks.
It exhausts you.
Yeah.
And, very quickly it breeds this toxic, suffocating environment where your team members feel like they're constantly being surveilled and second-guessed.
Which is miserable for everyone involved. So to help you break that cycle, we're diving deep into this let them theory.
Right. And Mel Robbins originally developed this as a personal psychological tool. Right.
Yeah, exactly. It was a way to release that exhausting burden of trying to control other people's actions in everyday life, just letting people be themselves.
But David Gerbitz took that core principle and mapped it directly onto corporate leadership.
He did. He recognized that the ultimate corporate survival skill is shifting from that command and control micromanagement style to, empowering influence.
So we are going to get incredibly granular today. We aren't just tossing leadership platitudes at you.
No, we want to look at the actual neurobiology of why your stress infects your team.
We're going to build out the architecture of your daily schedule to prevent cognitive overload. We'll map out exactly how to run a one-on-one meeting without triggering an employee's threat response.
And how to conduct a project post-mortem without turning it into a courtroom trial.
But before we can look outward at your team, we really have to look inward. Because honestly, you cannot expect your team to manage their emotions or handle stakeholder anxiety if you aren't managing your own.
That is the absolute foundation. There's this concept that is as simple as it is intimidating, which is leaders bring the weather.
Leaders bring the weather. I love that phrasing.
It's so true, though. A leader's internal emotional state does not stay internal. It basically dictates the entire atmospheric pressure of the room.
Right, because modern management is happening under an avalanche of stress.
Oh, completely. You're dealing with the blistering speed of technological disruption, shifting market forces, constant pressure to hit revenue targets.
And when a human being is placed under that level of sustained stress, our evolutionary biology just sort of takes over.
Exactly. We revert to our most deeply ingrained protective behaviors.
And for a high-achieving manager, that usually manifests as like hypervigilance, right? Or anxiety, or just really sharp, impatient anger.
Yeah, you snap at people. But I want to push on that idea of the leader's emotional state dictating the room.
Okay, let's unpack it.
Because the common corporate analogy is that a manager needs to be a thermostat, not a thermometer.
Right, I've heard that one a million times. A thermometer just reacts to the heat of the room. Like if the project is on fire, the thermometer spikes and reflects the panic.
But a thermostat actively sets the temperature.
But, here's my issue with that analogy. A thermostat doesn't just magically display a cool number and hope the room catches on.
That's a good point.
It has a feedback loop, right? It measures the ambient temperature, compares it to the target baseline, and then it quietly kicks on the AC.
Yeah, the mechanical response.
So for a manager, what is the actual AC? Like, functionally, how are you lowering the temperature of a panicked room?
The AC in that scenario is your physiological signaling.
Oh, physiological. Okay, tell me more.
It's the literal tone of your voice. It's the pacing of your speech. It's your deliberate choice to slow down a frantic conversation.
So it's not just what you say, but how your body is saying it.
Exactly, because when a team is in crisis, their sympathetic nervous systems are highly activated. They are basically in fight or flight mode. So if you walk into that room speaking really quickly, firing off aggressive questions, physically embodying tension, your team's mirror neurons are going to pick up on that.
And they just amplify their own panic.
Yes. You are biologically signaling to their nervous systems that the threat level is severe.
But conversely, if you enter that space with relaxed body language, a slower cadence, a measured tone.
You are engaging in co-regulation. You are offering their nervous systems a calm anchor.
Okay, but doing that in real time feels nearly impossible. Like when your Slack is just lighting up and your VP is demanding answers right now, how do you actually build that internal anchor?
Well, it requires an intentional, disciplined practice of self-awareness. It's not just an innate personality trait, It is a muscle you have to build.
So what does flexing that muscle look like?
In the heat of the moment, before you respond to that urgent email or walk into that crisis meeting, you have to force a cognitive pause.
Just literally stop for a second.
Yes. You have to ask yourself diagnostic questions like, why am I feeling this spike of panic right now?
Right. Is the belief driving my reaction based on actual data? Or is it just a catastrophic assumption?
Exactly. Am I about to lead this interaction from a place of fear and self-preservation or a place of clarity and strategy?
And that pause interrupts the amygdala hijack.
It does. It stops the raw emotional reaction and brings your prefrontal cortex, the logical, strategic part of your brain, back online.
And that matters so much because you simply cannot lead a team through complex, high-stakes problems with sustained panic.
You really can't. I mean, frenetic, anxious energy might compel an employee to work late one night out of fear of getting yelled at, but it is not a sustainable motivator.
It just burns people to a crisp.
Precisely. An internal state of calm is directly correlated with team innovation and cognitive performance.
Because when you are operating from a frantic, hyper-controlling state, your team's cognitive bandwidth is entirely consumed by threat detection.
Yeah, they aren't thinking about how to solve the client's problem. They are just thinking about how to avoid triggering your anger.
They're just trying to survive the interaction.
But when you establish a calm, predictable environment, you remove that cognitive tax.
You create the psychological white space for them to actually think deeply, connect disparate ideas, and innovate.
Exactly. So we know emotionally we need to be the thermostat. We need to shift from controlling out of fear to empowering out of clarity.
Right. But let's look at how that internal fear actually manifests in the day-to-day workflow.
It usually looks like a manager who simply cannot let go of the steering wheel.
Yes. We need to clearly define what the let them approach actually looks like in practice, because there's this massive misconception out there.
Oh, huge misconception.
People think that empowering a team just means abdicating responsibility entirely.
And that is a critical distinction to make. The let them theory is not about leaning back, putting your feet on the desk, and just hoping the work gets done somehow.
Right, it's not a passive free-for-all.
Not at all. It is about stepping fully into the role of a strategic guide and an enabler.
You are shifting your energy from forcing micro results to inspiring macro outcomes through influence.
It is the transition from being a taskmaster to being a capacity builder.
Let's ground this in a real-world corporate scenario. Let's compare two timelines of the exact same event.
I love this exercise. Okay, set the scene.
All right, imagine it is Tuesday, and a massive, career-defining strategy deck needs to be presented to the executive board on Friday. You, the newly promoted manager, assign this deck to your lead analyst.
Okay, so in timeline A, you are the controlling boss. You are operating entirely from a place of fear and self-preservation.
Right. So you assign the deck, but you don't actually trust the analyst to do it to your exact standards.
Because you think your way is the only right way. So you schedule twice daily check-ins.
That's the dreaded twice daily check-in.
Yeah.
And then you leave 35 comments on the Google Doc at midnight.
Yeah, you essentially rewrite their executive summary because it doesn't sound exactly like your voice. You dictate the precise formatting of the financial modeling slides.
And what actually happens to the human being on the receiving end of that?
You completely suffocate their growth. You rob them of the opportunity to flex their strategic thinking.
And fundamentally, capable professionals deeply resent being watched and doubted like that.
They really do. When an employee senses that you do not trust them to execute the job they were hired to do, a phenomenon called learned helplessness sets in.
Learn helplessness. That's a powerful term.
It means they realize that no matter how hard they try, you are going to overwrite their work anyway.
So they just stop trying. They stop thinking proactively.
They just become order takers, waiting for your next command.
And meanwhile, you're sitting there at 2 a.m., totally exhausted, doing the work of 3 people, complaining to your partner that, oh, no one on my team takes initiative.
It is a complete self-fulfilling prophecy of managerial failure.
It really is. Okay, now let's rewind and look at timeline B, the empowering boss.
Right. In this timeline, you apply the let them approach.
So you assign the strategy deck, but instead of dictating the font size and the bullet points, you provide incredibly clear, crystalline direction on the ultimate goal.
You explain what the executive board needs to feel and understand by the very end of the presentation.
You establish the strategic guardrails and the absolute non-negotiables. And then
You let them own the work.
you just let them figure out the narrative structure. You let them dig into the data their way.
And the outcome there is completely transformational.
Because failure isn't being punished at every micro step, the analyst actually has the freedom to innovate.
Exactly. They might uncover a data trend or a visualization method that you, in your stressed out state, never would have even considered.
More importantly, because you gave them psychological ownership of the project, their intrinsic motivation just skyrockets.
Because it is their presentation with their name on it. It's not just a checklist they are executing to appease you.
Right. They will work with a level of dedication and accountability that you could never force out of them.
The psychological shift here is really the difference between a transactional relationship and a transformational one.
Break that down a bit. Transactional versus transformational.
Well, control is entirely transactional. It's write this slide, get my approval, do this task, avoid my criticism. It requires your constant, relentless energy to sustain.
But influence is transformational. When you let them own the process, it becomes a point of deep professional pride for them.
Yeah.
Okay, that all sounds beautiful in theory, but let's get ruthlessly practical for a second.
Yeah.
Changing a deep-seated behavioral pattern isn't going to happen just because you listen to a nice concept on a deep dive.
No, it takes work.
Right. How do you actually do this on a random Wednesday morning when you have 40 unread messages, 2 team members are out sick, and you have a panic attack brewing?
That's the real test, isn't it?
Yeah. What does the actual architecture of your day need to look like to support this kind of intentional leadership?
Well, intentional leadership requires a deliberate restructuring of your time and capacity.
Because you cannot regulate your emotions or be a strategic guide if you are existing in a state of perpetual reactivity.
Exactly. The most common trap for a new manager is allowing their calendar to become a dumping ground for other people's priorities.
Oh, absolutely. So you have to build actionable routines to protect your executive function.
And it actually starts before you even log on.
And we're not talking about some elaborate 2-hour meditation retreat every morning.
Yeah, no. We are talking about a diagnostic morning routine. Just 10 minutes. Before you check your phone and let the crises of the day flood your brain, you need to check your mental weather.
You need to explicitly recognize your triggers.
Right. If you know that a vague email from a certain stakeholder always makes your blood pressure spike, acknowledge that before you open your inbox.
You have to map your emotional minefield so you don't accidentally step on a trigger and blow up at your team during the 9 a.m. stand-up.
Building on that self-awareness, the most crucial structural habit you can adopt during the workday is utilizing dedicated, fiercely protected work blocks.
You must break the cycle of back-to-back 30-minute meetings.
It is toxic. There is a massive cognitive penalty for context switching.
Yes, if you are jumping from a budget review to a product brainstorm to a performance issue without a single minute to process, Your brain accumulates a massive cognitive load.
You build up this frenetic, rushed energy, and you end up bringing the anxiety of the previous meeting right into the next one.
You must literally block out time on your calendar to synthesize information, think strategically, and honestly just breathe.
So it's about shifting the metric of productivity.
How so?
Well, as an individual contributor, productivity meant crossing 20 things off a checklist. But as a manager, doing fewer things with a higher degree of presence is vastly more valuable.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
And then there are the micro habits, right? The
Mhm.
things you do in the margins of the day.
Yeah, the most vital one being the habit of the strategic pause.
When an employee drops a massive problem in your lap, your reflex will be to instantly solve it for them.
Which is the individual contributor instinct kicking in again. You have to train yourself to pause, take a breath, and reframe the moment.
You ask yourself internally, am I jumping to a catastrophic conclusion here? Do I need to solve this, or do I need to ask them a question so they can solve it?
The value of this predictable daily architecture cannot be overstated. Consistency is the bedrock of influence.
Because if your mood, your availability, or your reaction to bad news shifts wildly from hour to hour, your team is going to waste an enormous amount of their daily mental energy just trying to read your tea leaves.
They will spend more time managing you and your unpredictable weather than they spend managing their actual work.
But when you establish predictable rhythms, when they know you have deep work blocks, when they know you don't send frantic emails at 11 p.m., you provide a secure container for them.
As the old adage goes, with structure comes freedom. Your predictability gives them the psychological safety to focus entirely on their output.
Wait, okay, I have to stop you there. I am fully on board with providing structure and not being a volatile nightmare of a boss.
Always a good goal.
Right. But let's go back to timeline B, where we delegated that massive strategy deck. Managing by outcomes sounds phenomenal in a textbook. But if a major quarterly revenue target is tied to this project, and I check in on Wednesday and see my team going down a path that I know from my experience is going to crash and burn, you're telling me I just let them drive the car off the cliff?
That is the exact friction point every great leader hits. And it is a completely valid fear.
Because at the end of the day, my neck is on the line. The executive board isn't going to fire the analyst. They're going to fire me.
Right, but this is where the nuance of managing by outcomes is critical. Let them does not mean abandoning your standards or ignoring an impending disaster.
Okay, good.
In fact, true empowerment requires holding the bar incredibly high. You are not lowering your expectations, you are changing your methodology for ensuring those expectations are met.
So you prevent the car crash in the very first step of delegation.
Exactly. You utilize a concept akin to the military's commander's intent.
Commander's intent, I like that. So before a single piece of work begins, you must define the what and the why with surgical precision.
Because ambiguity is the silent, devastating saboteur of corporate teams.
If an employee does not know exactly what a successful outcome looks like and exactly why it matters to the broader business strategy, they will just spin in circles, making assumptions.
You have to clearly articulate it. You say, we need this software module shipped by Q3, and the reason why is because it unlocks a critical new revenue stream in the European market.
The non-negotiable guardrails are data compliance and keeping latency under 50 milliseconds.
How you write the code to achieve that, though, is up to you.
Okay, so the destination is locked in, the guardrails are set. But how do you handle the anxiety of the journey? Because my instinct is still going to be to peek at their code every 5 minutes.
You manage that anxiety through structured inquiry-based check-ins rather than dictatorial takeovers.
Inquiry-based check-in, so you don't ask, why did you do it this way, which puts them immediately on the defensive.
No, you ask, what progress are we making against the latency goal? What roadblocks are you hitting? On a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you that we will hit the Friday deadline?
And if they say 4,
If they say 4, you don't take the keyboard.
you ask, what resources do you need for me to get that to an 8?
Yes. Your role shifts from doing the work to being the snowplow clearing the bureaucratic ice and cross-functional roadblocks so they can drive as fast as possible.
You are holding them accountable to the outcome, but offering immense support on the process.
And accountability naturally flourishes in that environment because the team understands the deep purpose behind the work.
They feel a genuine sense of authorship over the path they take. You aren't forcing compliance through threats. You are cultivating commitment by treating them like highly capable adults.
Exactly. And while these high-stakes projects are the crucible where trust is tested, the actual foundation of that trust is built in the mundane day-to-day trenches.
Specifically, It is built during your weekly one-on-one meetings.
Because a poorly run one-on-one can completely demoralize a high performer, while an intentional one can unlock profound autonomy.
I cannot emphasize enough how damaging a distracted manager is during a one-on-one. I actually once had a director who would literally keep typing on his mechanical keyboard, staring at his second monitor while I was giving him crucial updates.
Oh, that is the
It
worst.
was awful. I could hear the clack, clack, clack of his keys while I was trying to explain a major client risk. It instantly communicated to me that I was the absolute lowest priority in his day.
It's so disrespectful. If you are going to hold a one-on-one, you have to be radically present.
Close the laptop, put the phone in a drawer, turn off the Slack notifications.
You must listen to understand the subtext of what they're saying, not just scan the conversation waiting for your turn to speak.
Presence is the ultimate currency of respect.
It really is. Once you have established that presence, you use the one-on-one to actively encourage their autonomy.
You don't use this time for simple status updates. That can just be an email.
Right. You use this time to ask expensive questions that force them to think like leaders.
Questions like, what piece of work are you most proud of this week? Or, where are you feeling stuck, and how can I best support you in getting unstuck?
You are implicitly telling them that they own their development, and you are just there to facilitate it.
But eventually, in those one-on-ones, you are going to have to deliver constructive feedback.
It's inevitable.
An employee is going to drop the ball, mishandle a client call, miss a critical detail. How do you correct course without triggering that fight-or-flight response we talked about earlier?
Delivering feedback effectively is entirely about managing neurobiology.
Explain that.
When a human being receives critical feedback, the brain's threat center, the amygdala, often interprets it as a literal social attack.
It releases cortisol, the person gets defensive, their perspective narrows.
And they completely stop hearing whatever you say next.
So how do you counteract that?
The feedback must be incredibly specific, situational, and timely. You do not wait 6 months for a formal annual review to tell someone their communication style in a specific meeting was abrasive.
You address it within 24 hours.
Yeah.
And you lead with curiosity, not accusations. That's such a crucial pivot. Instead of saying, you totally botched that stakeholder presentation, you were way too aggressive, you approach it like a mutual puzzle.
Right. You say, I noticed in the stakeholder meeting that the conversation got quite tense when we discussed the budget. Walk me through your goal for that interaction. How did you feel it went?
You are giving them the agency to analyze their own behavior first.
And to ensure that your critique doesn't completely crush them, you must adhere to the 5-to-1 ratio.
The 5-to-1 ratio, let's dig into that.
Research consistently shows that humans have a profound negativity bias. A single piece of critical feedback will ring in an employee's ears for weeks, while praise fades in minutes.
So true.
It takes roughly 5 distinct instances of positive reinforcement, 5 hits of dopamine, to build up enough emotional resilience and relational trust, so that one piece of negative feedback can be absorbed constructively rather than defensively.
So you have to actively hunt for things your team is doing right and
Yeah.
validate them constantly.
So that when you do have to correct them, they know you are fundamentally on their side.
Here is the part of the feedback loop that terrifies new managers: asking for it in return.
Oh, yeah.
The guide notes that a massive accelerator for a manager's growth is routinely asking the team for feedback on your leadership.
Asking things like, what is one thing I am doing right now that is slowing you down? Or how could I have communicated that strategy change more clearly?
It requires immense vulnerability to ask those questions, especially when you are battling first-time manager imposter syndrome and feel like you need to project flawless competence.
But admitting imperfection is the strongest signal of confidence you can send. It normalizes vulnerability.
It proves to the team that you are not operating from a fragile ego, that you value continuous growth over appearing perfect.
And that you view the team as a collaborative ecosystem.
That level of vulnerability is exactly what builds the scaffolding for our next topic. Because despite all your brilliant delegation, your perfect 5-to-1 feedback ratio, and your deep presence,
A massive, catastrophic mistake is eventually going to happen.
a server will crash, a major account will churn. How you, the leader, react in the seconds and hours after that failure will permanently define your team's culture.
To understand the stakes of a mistake, we have to look at Google's famous Project Aristotle.
Oh, this study is fascinating.
It is. Google spent years and millions of dollars analyzing their workforce to figure out what made their highest performing teams so effective.
They looked at educational backgrounds, tenure, technical skills, and management hierarchies.
But the number one correlating factor for a high-performing team wasn't raw intellect or resources. It was a concept championed by Harvard professor Amy Edmondson, which is psychological safety.
We need to unpack that term because psychological safety is often wildly misunderstood in corporate environments.
People think it means a soft, consequence-free workplace where everyone gets a participation trophy and we never say a harsh word.
But that is not it at all. Psychological safety is the shared belief that you will not be punished, humiliated, or marginalized for speaking up with an idea, asking a quote-unquote dumb question, or admitting a mistake.
Exactly. Courageous cultures with high psychological safety are actually incredibly rigorous and demanding.
Because the employees are not wasting 30% of their cognitive energy trying to manage their personal risk or cover their tracks.
They are entirely focused on solving the complex problems in front of them. When that safety is absent, toxicity sets in instantly.
Mistakes are buried until they explode. People point fingers. Cross-functional political jockeying reigns supreme because everyone is just trying to make sure they aren't the one left holding the bag when the executives come looking for blood.
Which brings us to the post-mortem.
The dreaded post-mortem. The project failed. You lost the client. The team is sitting in a conference room, their shoulders are tense, and they're waiting for you to start yelling. How do you run that meeting?
You have to practically apply Carol Dweck's concept of the growth mindset. You must verbally and explicitly reframe the failure.
You do not start by assigning blame. You do not default to interrogating the person who made the error.
You open the meeting by centering the entire discussion around clinical objective curiosity.
You say, "Thank you to everyone who brought this issue to light quickly. The outcome is clearly not what we projected. Our goal today is not to figure out who is at fault. Our goal is to figure out where the system broke down."
What did we learn from this data? What structural changes will we implement so this doesn't happen next quarter?
I love the analogy of treating a postmortem like a science lab instead of a courtroom.
That's a great way to put it.
Because in a courtroom, the entire architecture of the room is adversarial. Everyone is defensive. The prosecutor is looking for a guilty party to punish and sentence.
But in a science lab, a failed experiment is not a moral failing. It is simply fresh, highly valuable data.
It is empirical information about a methodology that does not work, which intrinsically moves you one step closer to the methodology that does work.
That is a brilliant framework, because when a leader actively celebrates the rigorous effort and the courage it took to try a novel approach, rather than just punitively attacking the poor outcome, it completely eradicates the fear of failure.
And the fear of failure is the absolute ultimate assassin of creativity, innovation, and speed.
If your team is terrified of you, they will never take a calculated risk. They will only ever pitch the safest, most mediocre ideas.
So, we have navigated operational mistakes. But mistakes aren't the only source of friction.
No, often the hardest issues aren't about the work itself. They are about the human beings trying to do the work together.
Interpersonal friction, ego clashes, competing departmental priorities, they're inevitable. And first-time managers usually dread this. They want a harmonious team, so they run away from conflict.
The desire to avoid conflict is deeply human. But as a leader, conflict avoidance is a dereliction of duty.
We have to shatter the misconception that all conflict is inherently toxic. Conflict, when harnessed and managed correctly, is a vital mechanism for organizational growth and clarity.
Because when a manager avoids conflict just to keep the peace, they aren't actually creating peace.
They are creating an illusion of harmony. On the surface, in the Zoom meetings, everyone is nodding and smiling. But underneath, resentment is simmering in back-channel Slack messages. Trust is eroding.
And if you, as the leader, are avoiding having the hard conversations with your peers or your team, the entire department is forced to swirl in unresolved ambiguity.
They don't know what the actual strategic priorities are because the leadership team refuses to hash out their disagreements openly.
Artificial harmony is incredibly destructive. So how do you facilitate good conflict?
The first step is that you have to explicitly name the conflict. Do not speak in corporate euphemisms.
You bring the tension right into the light. You say, it seems we have a structural conflict here regarding role clarity between the marketing and sales teams. Or, we clearly have a fundamental difference of opinion on the strategic roadmap for Q4.
Once a conflict is named objectively, it loses its subterranean power.
And once it's named, you relentlessly focus the conversation on solutions and systems, not personality flaws.
You don't let it devolve into, well, marketing is just lazy. You frame it as, our current lead handoff process is broken.
And most importantly, as the leader, this is where you really earn your paycheck. You have to model how to engage in a heated, passionate debate while remaining entirely emotionally regulated.
You stay the thermostat. You show them that we can disagree vehemently about a strategy without threatening our professional relationship.
And the ultimate way to elevate conflict from petty bickering to productive debate is to tie it back to the broader meaning of the work.
Employees do not just want a biweekly direct deposit. They want to know their labor matters. They crave purpose.
As a leader, you have to constantly validate the dignity of their work. You have to connect the granular dots between their daily tasks and the overarching mission of the company.
When you do that, the nature of the conflict changes entirely.
Because when the team is deeply aligned on a meaningful shared purpose, the friction stops being about bruised egos or territorial disputes.
It transforms into a passionate, rigorous debate about the absolute best way to achieve the mission. The conflict serves the purpose rather than distracting from it.
Balancing high expectations with deep kindness means you never back away from tough standards or necessary friction, but you handle every single interaction with an unwavering respect for the human dignity of your team members.
Which brings us to the ultimate synthesis of our deep dive today. Let's pull all of these threads together for that new manager listening who is getting ready to walk into their first big team meeting.
The profound transition from relying on raw control to relying on empowering influence is, fundamentally, an inside job.
It begins and ends with your own psychology.
By mastering your internal emotional weather, by deliberately designing a daily schedule that protects your capacity to think, by fiercely focusing on outcomes while letting go of the methods.
By transforming postmortems from courtrooms into science labs, and by stepping bravely into productive conflict, you're no longer just managing a checklist of corporate tasks.
You are engaged in the profound work of building human potential.
You are creating the ecosystem for other professionals to thrive, to innovate, and to discover capabilities they didn't even know they possessed.
And that is the ultimate payoff of leadership. The legacy of a truly great manager is never measured by the flawlessly formatted spreadsheets you updated or the thousands of emails you sent.
It is measured entirely by the capacity you build in others. By adopting the let them mindset, your impact transcends the immediate quarterly goals.
It bleeds into your employees' long-term careers, their self-confidence, how they show up for their families, and how they eventually lead teams of their own.
You have the rare, profound opportunity to be the inflection point in someone's career. You can be the person who changed their entire professional trajectory simply because you possess the self-awareness and the courage to believe in them enough to let them lead.
As we wrap up this mentorship session, we want to leave you with one final lingering thought to deeply reflect on as you prepare for your next one-on-one or your next crisis meeting.
I want you to think back through your entire career. Think about the absolute best boss you ever worked for, the one who challenged you, supported you, and empowered you to do the best work of your life.
Now contrast that. Think about the absolute worst boss you ever had, the one who micromanaged you, terrified you, and made you physically dread opening your laptop in the morning.
Keep those two faces in your mind. Now ask yourself, when you are not in the room, which of those two people is your new team describing right now? And what is the exact, specific action you are going to take tomorrow morning to ensure they are describing the right one?